In another video, I shared about my recent trip to India and how in India I had a chance, a unique opportunity to interact with and be with nearly 30 seminary leaders from across the country and spend a few days with them to learn about their programs. And they were sharing with each other. And in the other video, I shared how this was part of my desire and desire of others to help these seminary leaders move from isolation to collaboration, to sharing with each other, to learning about each other, and also hopefully giving them a chance to have a little bit of rest, a little bit of margin in their lives, because we know the seminary leaders are going so hard at it, and most of them are bivocational, and they don't have a whole lot of extra time to rest and reflect about their program. So we're trying to give them that kind of experience. And in the prior video, I shared more about some of that. But I want to continue here because there were some remarkable discoveries that I had just watching them, because each of the seminary leaders, they were each of them would get up during this conference and they would share about their successes, their challenges, and what they were learning about leadership in their seminaries. And I started to share in the other video some of the things that I was discovering about them, especially about the funding part and what happens when you all of a sudden lose funding, right? And so how do they pivot? How do they begin to reimagine theological education in light of that? Well, another list here of things that I think are really important for us to be listening to and watching and observing and learning from our friends in India as they lead seminaries and Bible colleges. Here's something else I learned. Most of them are grounded on historical foundations and mission. Uh, Most of them are date back decades, even even nearly 100 years ago that they were founded. And most of them have some sense of, this is why we started this school. This is why we felt it was important. This is why our founders thought this was important. This is what the mission was that our founders felt was important. And I found, just listening to them and watching them, what amazed me is that they were still on mission, but as they were on mission, they were also reimagining how they continue to carry out that mission in modern times, in modern day India. They were willing to be thinking about new ways of furthering their mission. And I believe today this is really important. Younger people want to know what we stand for. Younger people, new students coming into these seminaries, they want to know that they are well grounded, well centered on what they really want to accomplish. And if not, then why should they be at a school like that? And also staff, faculty, and others that are involved as part of the team of the seminary or Bible college, they want to know why they're there. What is so important about this place? One of the seminary leaders had this quote. He said, "If you chase two rabbits, you will lose both." I just thought that was great. I mean, that makes sense, right? If you're going in too many different directions, you're not going to achieve any of them if you do that. And so what I found fascinating was that these seminaries valued their history, their tradition, why they were founded, and they wanted to continue to pursue that. And I think that's something important for us to, as we think about reimagining theological education, how do we do that today as well? But also, what I heard was, in the midst of staying on mission, there's also some staff changes that sometimes needs to take place. One of the leaders of one of the seminaries said that if you don't change the staff, sometimes they could become a drain on morale and blur your focus. A drain on morale and blur your focus. I thought this was a really good insight on his part. Another seminary leader called some of the staff legacy staff. And what he meant by that was that they were so focused on the way we used to do things that they couldn't adapt to the new ways of doing things that would still carry on that same mission of the seminary, but we had to do it in a fresh new way. And the need to have leadership, and this is important, leadership that is willing to understand and is understanding the need for change in staff and others that are a part of the leadership team, and bold enough to make the changes that need to be made. Otherwise, they will be a drain on morale and blur the focus of the seminary. And what are some of the programs today that we might be leading where we need to be looking at our staff and how are we leading them and how are we leading them well? That's important, yes. But are they on board with where the seminary, the program is going? And if not, how do you handle that? Seminary leaders in India are doing just that. There are seminaries that are very much focused on the urban parts of India. There's one seminary there from Mumbai. Now, Mumbai is the sixth most dense city in the world, the sixth most dense city in the world. And the seminary leader was up there sharing about his school and his program, and he was just frustrated, saying, we don't know where to go anymore. We don't have any space. We don't know where to teach, where to lead, and develop seminary leaders. But they're finding their ways of how to do that. They're also doing it through offering courses at night and offering courses on the weekends. They're very much entrepreneurial in the way they're developing their mindset about their seminary, because they have to be creative, innovative in how they deliver their programs, develop leaders through their seminaries in their context today. So this whole area of the urban focus is very important in India today. Another aspect that I learned about theological education in India is the need for faculty development. Now, let me just say this. My interactions with seminary leaders from all across the world, this is a topic that is applicable no matter where I go, no matter who I talk to. The need for sound faculty is a significant challenge globally right now. India is no exception. So many seminary leaders were asking questions about how do we develop our faculty? How do we develop new faculty? How do we support the ones that we have? How do we help them to further their skills and their understanding of how to teach and what to teach and so on? And so this is a very significant part of what seminaries in India are looking at. But here's something else I discovered is that it's not just about faculty development, it's also leadership development. Many of these seminary leaders, many of them got up there and they said, you know what, I was not trained to be leading a seminary. I was trained in New Testament with my PhD, or Old Testament, or theology, or missiology, or some other discipline. I was not trained to lead a seminary. So what I discovered here is that there really needs to be two different tracks here. One is, well, how do we develop faculty, but also how do we develop leaders for schools? And what are the appropriate degree programs for that? So I'm watching that carefully, and I know our friends in India are watching that as well. The students. What I learned in India was that through these seminary leaders is that they have students from all walks of life. They have students from all different levels. They're professionals. Some want to be missionaries. Some want to be pastors. Some want to be counselors. Some want to be church planters. You name it, they have it in India. And another focus, of course, was the next generation leaders. How do they focus in on next generation? One school itself has graduated over 15,000 students over its 95-year history. Also, the area of alumni engagement and empowerment, both for alumni and students. This is a growing interest in India right now, because as these seminaries get older and older, they have more alumni, and how do they engage them, how to get them involved in their programs throughout the course of the year and so on. There are academic scholarly programs in various different languages, while others are more practically based. So in other words, there's a huge diversity. Some theological seminaries in India are very academic in their programs, but others are more concerned with how we produce some field-ready graduates for the churches here in our communities, in our India today. Some are more community-based, many involved and require church planting. I found this to be a significant trend in India. Almost all the seminary leaders were talking about how is it that we're developing church planters through our seminary programs. And I found that to be of great interest among all of them. In fact, one seminary has a graduate who has planted 67 churches and led over 10,000 people to Christ over his ministry since he graduated from their seminary. Missionaries as well is another big area right now in India. A lot of these programs, a lot of these seminaries are looking, how do we develop missionaries, because they are recognizing that many of their students are moving to different places, not just in India, but in other parts of the world. And how do we help them go and reach out to others? There was one seminary leader that was up there and he was saying, we have weekly Goya days. And I was like, Goya days? What is a Goya day? I didn't know. I had no idea what he was talking about. But what it was is it's weekly Go Ye days. Go Ye days. So these are weekly days where the seminary as a whole, students, faculty, all of them, they go out and they evangelize. They go share the gospel. They knock on people's doors. They are doing outreach throughout their community, and they're calling it Go Ye days, Go Ye days, but they are very much focused on that as well. One prominent and historical seminary has new leadership, and what was fascinating about him is that now this is a very large seminary. This is a new leader in the school, and he's having to ask the question: how do I begin to reimagine theological education for my seminary now that I am at the helm? And what he's done is he's done something rather vulnerable. He has decided to go to churches and go to others that are end users of their students and ask them questions about how are we doing? Are we really doing what we say we are doing? And he's invited churches to evaluate their graduates, and he's collected data and he's analyzed that data. He's now going back into his programs and retooling them a little bit. He's reimagining his programs in light of what he's hearing from these churches that are assessing their graduates. One school, prayer. Let me just say this: I was so impressed by these seminary leaders in India that are focused in on prayer. One school has prayer in the morning, each morning, and chapel at night, each night. So every student has morning prayer and evening chapel. Remarkable that they are able to sustain that and keep that going. One seminary has, on one Friday per month, they have fasting and prayer. So the community as a whole takes a day of fasting and of prayer. And they're uplifting the churches, they're uplifting the communities, they're uplifting their programs and the seminary leaders and so on and so forth. They're focused in on what is the Lord saying to us about our program. One seminary prohibits cell phones among their students. Now, I don't know how that would work in some parts of the world, but imagine you telling your student, no, you can't have cell phones. If you're going to be on campus here, no cell phones. And I don't know how they're getting away with it, but they are, and seminary students there are staying, they're learning, they're growing, they are still theirs. There. We have one seminary, well, actually multiple seminaries in India that have extended their programs beyond India. They are globally engaged, specifically in Africa. There were several seminaries in India that have programs now in Africa. We have seminaries that are developing programs in various different languages, including Bengali, and also persecution. Let me just say this about persecution. In some ways, it's subtle, and we know that can happen, but in other ways, it's much more severe. And many of the seminary leaders talked about that and how they've had to navigate through that and how they've had to reimagine theological education in light of the persecution that's taken place. Let me share with you one story of a seminary that was founded back in 1977 in India. It was founded by a Pentecostal preacher up in the northeast portion of India. And it was his daughter who was sharing the story because now she is the one leading the seminary. And she shared about how her father, a Pentecostal preacher, was severely persecuted in that part of the land. And he was even attacked by vipers as he was traveling through the through the jungles. I mean, this guy was like a modern day Paul up there in Northeast India, but he was realizing mass conversions. There were many, many, many people coming to Christ, but there was little discipleship and training. So he decided to start a school. He started a seminary with 7 students in his home. And now, all these years later, this seminary has continued to press on despite numerous challenges for them. They now have hundreds of graduates, and they are focused on church planting and missions. And to hear the stories of how they continue to grow. And earlier I mentioned the foundation, having a clear focus on why we exist and why our founders started a school. They have that, and they're continuing that legacy. They're continuing that history by planting churches and having missionaries developed. And they also are now teaching Hindi to students. And the reason they're doing that is that their students can serve those in the more northern part of India. Friends, these are just a few things that I was able to glean from these 20-minute presentations from 27 seminary leaders across India over the course of a few days. And as I mentioned in the other video, ATA India has 196, almost 200 schools connected with them. This was just 27 of them that came together. Imagine all the different stories that we can hear from schools all across India besides those that I've shared with you here. We could have dozens of podcasts just on India alone. India could serve as a laboratory for globally thinking about and reimagining theological education together. What do you do when funding is cut off from your programs? How can you move beyond Western funding dependence? India is doing that. How do you lead an institution through challenges, especially handling staff and other changes that need to take place? Seminary leaders in India are doing that because they are wanting to reimagine their programs for today, for the context of India today. How do we do theological education in urban settings in places like Mumbai, the 6th most dense city in the world today? Well, there are seminary leaders in India that are doing that. What do we do about faculty development and leadership development? There are dozens of seminaries in India that are examining that and wondering, how do we do that? And we can learn from them. We could also encourage them along the way as they do that and reimagine theological education in that way. How do we engage and empower students and alumni? How do we get them involved in culture and society, especially in contexts like in India? It is so diverse, so many different languages and so on. Well, seminary leaders are doing that in India, and we can learn from them. How can we be vulnerable and are willing to have our programs assessed by those that are our end users, our stakeholders? The seminaries in India are willing to be that vulnerable and open up their programs and hear from the churches, hear from those that are receiving their graduates and say, here's what I'm hearing, here's what your graduate is able to do and not do. And then they're even bold enough, not just vulnerable, but bold enough to make changes so they can be more effective for culture, church, and society. We can learn from the Indian seminaries as they do some of this. What does it look like to extend programs to equip the Christ Church around the world besides India? Indian seminaries are doing that, including in Africa. They're doing things to reimagine theological education in a wonderfully vast and bold way. And during my time in India, as I listened to them, as I observed them, I thought, oh Lord God, thank you for these people. Thank you for what they're doing in their context. Thank you for their willingness to pray and seek your face, seek your wisdom, and to be bold enough to make the changes that they need to be making to reimagine theological education together. And as I conclude this video, I want to encourage all of us to not lose sight of what is the core purpose of our mission, and that is to strengthen the church for its mission, for God's mission through it. And in India, I saw seminaries from across the country that are doing everything they can, and they are being innovative and creative to make sure that the church is equipped for her mission. And oftentimes it requires them themselves, these seminary leaders, to reimagine what they're doing. So continue to join us as we continue to think through theological education in different parts of the world, different formats, different ways, and we continue to think about and reimagine theological education together.